Old Hollywood sparkled on screen, but behind the scenes, even the most glamorous stars relied on tricks of the trade. For many, the perfect head of hair wasn't real at all. Today, we reveal 18 legendary stars who wore wigs made of real human hair. Secrets stitched into style, crafted to preserve their fame, and never meant to be seen. 1. Elizabeth Taylor. Elizabeth Taylor's violet eyes and luscious hair helped define Hollywood beauty. But by her 30s, illness, stress, and overstyling took a toll on her real hair. To maintain her flawless look, Taylor relied on a carefully curated collection of wigs made from real human hair, each one styled to mirror her iconic image, no matter the occasion. These weren't ordinary wigs. Imported from Europe and managed by stylists who treated them like priceless artifacts, they were key to Taylor's public image. The real human hair allowed for shine, softness, and realism that synthetic alternatives couldn't provide. Whether gracing a red carpet or recovering from surgery, her appearance remained pristine. Taylor didn't see her wigs as weakness. Friends say she considered them armor, symbols of survival, in an industry that punished imperfection. In the end, her legacy wasn't just about beauty, it was about power and the tools she used to keep it. 2. Clark Gable. Clark Gable was the king of Hollywood, but his royal image was reinforced by something few knew: wigs. By his mid-30s, Gable's hair began thinning, and MGM wasn't about to let its top leading man show vulnerability. To preserve his commanding presence, Gable wore wigs made of real human hair, expertly styled and fitted to perfection. The realism of these wigs was critical. Under the harsh lights of Gone with the Wind, human hair ensured that his hair moved naturally and stayed in place, even in close-ups. The studio invested heavily in custom-made hairpieces that blended seamlessly into his look, making the illusion undetectable. Despite his rugged image, Gable's grooming was meticulous. Stylists adjusted his wigs before each take to match lighting, camera angles, and continuity. For fans, he remained the ideal man. But behind that masculine myth was a carefully managed detail: someone else's hair, woven into Hollywood history. 3. Greta Garbo. Greta Garbo was cinema's great enigma, icy, distant, and devastatingly beautiful. Her hair, cascading in soft waves, was part of that ethereal charm. Yet as the years passed and stress and treatments took their toll, Garbo increasingly relied on wigs made of real human hair to maintain her famously aloof perfection. These wigs were top-tier, custom-ordered from Europe, and styled down to the last strand. The softness and flow of real hair were essential to preserving her signature look on film, especially under the high-contrast lighting of the time. She often wore wigs even off-screen, blending them into her private mystique. Garbo never spoke of her wigs publicly, but through letters and notes, it's clear she used them not out of vanity, but preservation. The woman who wanted to be alone stayed hidden behind layers of illusion, including strands of human hair that allowed her legend to live untouched by time. 4. Bert Lancaster. Bert Lancaster radiated masculine intensity, often playing soldiers, rebels, and outlaws. But off-screen, Lancaster grappled with something the camera couldn't show: hair loss. As the 1960s approached, he began wearing real human hair wigs for key roles, especially those that demanded youthful vigor or period accuracy. Lancaster's wigs were engineered to endure. During epic productions like Elmer Gantry or The Leopard, he needed wigs that could handle sweat, wind, and action scenes. Synthetic wigs failed the test, so stylists created durable, breathable wigs from natural human hair that would hold under pressure. He treated the wigs as part of his costume, not a secret. Private, but not embarrassed. He understood they allowed him to extend his prime in a competitive, youth-driven industry. Each strand told a story, not of deception, but of defiance against a system that discarded its heroes too soon. 5. Vivien Lee. Vivien Lee's beauty was so haunting it transcended the screen. But beneath the iconic locks of Scarlett O'Hara lay a hidden reality. Lee suffered from mental illness and illness-related hair loss. By the 1950s, she regularly wore wigs made of human hair, both on stage and screen. Her wigs were soft, lightweight, and matched perfectly to her natural texture. Stylists designed them to enhance the fragility and elegance of her characters. Whether in A Streetcar Named Desire or on stage in Shakespeare, the wigs allowed her to maintain consistency, even during flare-ups of her health issues. Lee never discussed them openly, but close friends said she viewed them as lifelines, tools that allowed her to inhabit characters even when her body and mind betrayed her. Her wigs weren't just adornments. They were silent allies in her fight to remain brilliant, even in darkness. 6. Tony Curtis. Tony Curtis exuded charm, coolness, and style. His dark, thick hair was a trademark feature, but by the 1960s, it had started thinning dramatically. Rather than risk his heartthrob status, Curtis adopted wigs made of real human hair to continue appearing youthful on screen. Curtis embraced variety. He had a rotating collection of wigs suited to different roles, red carpet events, and public appearances. These hairpieces were custom-made and hand-dyed, crafted to move naturally under studio lights. Curtis was known to joke about his borrowed hair, though in public, the transition was seamless. His openness with friends contrasted with the silence in the press. Behind the scenes, Curtis saw his wigs not as deception, but reinvention. They helped him stay relevant, desirable, and bankable, a matinee idol through and through, supported by strands that weren't entirely his own. 7. Lana Turner. Lana Turner's icy beauty made her an instant icon. Her sleek blonde hair became synonymous with old Hollywood sensuality, but after years of peroxide, curling irons, and harsh treatments, her hair suffered. To maintain her image, Turner began wearing high-quality human hair wigs in her most iconic roles. These wigs were flawless. Made from hand-selected European hair, they allowed stylists to create the glamorous shapes and styles fans expected. Whether in The Postman Always Rings Twice or at premieres, her wigs ensured she looked every inch the star. Turner saw them as tools, not secrets. Behind the camera, she treated them like part of her wardrobe. In the public's eyes, she never faltered. Even as age and damage crept in, her wigs gave her the power to remain timeless, elegant, and just out of reach. Exactly the way Hollywood liked it. 8. Charlton Heston. Charlton Heston was a towering figure in biblical epics and historical dramas. But by the time Planet of the Apes hit theaters, his hair had thinned considerably. To preserve his imposing screen presence, Heston began using human hair wigs, especially during roles that required commanding presence and classical aesthetics. The wigs were masterfully constructed, designed to endure desert shoots, intense lighting, and elaborate costumes. Only human hair could deliver the realism necessary to match the grandeur of Heston's characters. His stylists ensured seamless integration, often applying the wig before dawn to avoid scrutiny on set. Though he never acknowledged them publicly, Heston's use of wigs helped sustain his cinematic dominance. They allowed him to remain larger than life, a figure of power etched into pop culture. The wigs weren't vanity, they were continuity. In a changing world, they kept the legend intact. 9. John Harlow. Jean Harlow's platinum hair changed Hollywood forever, but it nearly destroyed her scalp. Her transformation from brunette to blonde bombshell involved dangerous bleach formulas that caused hair breakage and bald patches. By the mid-1930s, Harlow secretly began wearing wigs made of real human hair. These wigs were dyed to match her iconic shade and styled to move flawlessly under the lights. MGM Studios commissioned only the best, using soft human hair to mimic the famous wave and shine that made her so bankable. Harlow's health declined rapidly, and off-screen she often wore headscarves to protect what remained. But on-screen, her wigs ensured that the fantasy of Jean Harlow lived on, bright, seductive, and untouchable. Behind every flip of her famous curls was a tragedy disguised in glamour. Certainly, here is the final part of the rewritten script, featuring entries 10 to 18 and the outro. 10. Lucille Ball. Lucille Ball's fiery red hair was as famous as her comic genius, but after years of chemical treatments, bleaching, and styling, her hair began to thin significantly. To maintain her trademark look, Ball turned to real human hair wigs, crafted with extreme care to replicate her iconic curls. Ball owned a collection of red wigs, all maintained by top Hollywood stylists. Real human hair was vital to preserve bounce and shine under studio lighting, especially during long I Love Lucy shoots. The wigs allowed for quick changes between takes and guaranteed consistency across scenes. Sidney Gilleroff, MGM's legendary hairdresser, often styled her wigs himself. They were more than accessories. They were part of the show. For Lucille, the wigs weren't about hiding. They were about control, precision, and ensuring that the world always saw the star she wanted them to see: bold, funny, and perfectly coiffed. 11. Rock Hudson. Rock Hudson's chiseled jaw and suave demeanor made him the embodiment of 1950s masculinity. But behind the camera, he dealt with a quietly kept issue: progressive hair loss. To uphold the illusion of his eternal heartthrob status, Hudson adopted high-quality human hair wigs tailored to match his natural style. His team sourced European human hair that blended flawlessly, allowing Hudson to maintain his polished image even under the harsh scrutiny of film sets and stage lights. The wigs were lightweight and breathable, ensuring comfort through long takes. Hudson's wigs became part of his daily grooming ritual. They were always styled to precision, especially as he aged. Though the public remained unaware, insiders noted his sensitivity about appearance, perhaps a reflection of deeper insecurities in a world where identity was already a guarded secret. For Hudson, the wigs weren't just hairpieces, they were armor. And behind them stood a man whose beauty was carefully preserved, strand by strand. 12th. Joan Crawford. Joan Crawford was a master of reinvention. From flapper to empress, her image was a powerful force. But by the 1950s, years of harsh styling had ravaged her natural hair. To maintain her immaculate screen presence, Crawford turned to real human hair wigs that exuded glamour from every angle. She sourced them from Europe, worked with top stylists, and even color-coded them by character. Crawford's attention to detail was legendary. She would brush, trim, and style them herself before shoots. Human hair allowed for natural shine, perfect silhouettes, and a sense of authenticity that matched her intense on-screen presence. Crawford reportedly treated her wigs like extensions of her personality. Each one served a different emotional tone, a different facade. They weren't disguises, they were declarations. In an industry that demanded perfection, Crawford wore hers like a crown, and no one ever doubted the Queen. 13th, Marlene Dietrich. Marlene Dietrich defined the term iconic, from her angular cheekbones to her meticulously styled hair. But by the 1940s, her platinum locks had thinned from years of bleach and stress. She turned to real human hair wigs, ensuring that her cinematic mystique never cracked under pressure. Dietrich personally oversaw the creation of her wigs, working with Sidney Guilleroff and elite European stylists to get the density, flow, and texture just right. These wigs weren't just used in film. They were part of her daily life, allowing her to shift personas at will. Even off stage, she wore them with pride, sometimes paired with veils or hats. Dietrich believed in illusion, not to deceive, but to elevate. For her, wigs were a form of art, performance, and power. And in those softly waving strands, she carried the legacy of old Hollywood's most enduring seductress. 14. Cary Grant. Cary Grant's elegance seemed effortless, but his appearance, like his persona, was curated with precision. As he aged, Grant began to experience hair loss and turned to discreet, partial wigs made from real human hair to maintain his suave image on and off screen. Grant's wigs were incredibly subtle, blended seamlessly to look undetectable in close-ups and social gatherings alike. He used only human hair for natural movement and sheen, and he employed top stylists to ensure the pieces matched lighting, camera angles, and facial features. Even as he moved into retirement and public life, Grant kept his image pristine. His wigs weren't about hiding, they were about protecting something sacred, the illusion of effortless charm. And in that, Grant was a master. With or without real hair, he remained the epitome of timeless cool. 15. Humphrey Bogart. Humphrey Bogart projected grit and honesty. But when his hair began receding in the 1940s, even the toughest guy in town turned to artifice. Bogart wore custom-made human hair wigs to maintain his signature silhouette across noir classics and wartime dramas. Crafted by Max Factor's studio stylists, the wigs were fitted to perfect, and carefully styled each day to blend with his remaining natural hair. The real hair helped preserve texture and realism on camera, a critical element in his close-up heavy performances. Bacall, his wife, once teased that the toughest guy in Hollywood started each day with bobby pins. But Bogart took it in stride. His wigs were part of the act, a necessary detail in a performance so convincing that audiences never questioned what was real and what was crafted. 16. Rita Hworth. Rita Hayworth's red waves were magnetic, immortalized by her unforgettable turn in Gilda. But behind that fiery mane was a darker truth. Her real hair was brittle, patchy, and worn thin from endless bleaching. By her mid-30s, Hworth turned to wigs made from real human hair to uphold the illusion. These wigs were delicate and luminous, styled to perfection to recreate the bounce and richness of her prime. During long filming schedules, they saved her from further damage while maintaining consistency in her look. Her stylists dyed and reshaped them constantly, tailoring each to the film's mood and era. Privately, Hworth hated the toll her image had taken. She wore scarves at home and often removed her wigs as soon as the cameras stopped rolling. But in public, she was always the flame-haired goddess. Her wigs weren't deception. They were a necessity carved out of survival. 17. James Stewart. James Stewart's boyish looks and everyman appeal made him one of Hollywood's most beloved stars. But like many actors of his era, he faced receding hairlines as he aged. To maintain visual continuity in films, Stewart began using finely styled human hair wigs. His approach was modest. The wigs were soft, natural, and minimally styled, designed to blend in, not stand out. In Vertigo and Anatomy of a Murder, They were essential to ensure his familiar profile remained unchanged, even under Alfred Hitchcock's meticulous lens. Stewart viewed wigs practically, never indulging in vanity. Crew members recall him chuckling during fittings, calling them just part of the job. For an actor so synonymous with sincerity, it's fitting that his wigs weren't a secret shame, but a quiet nod to the machinery behind the magic. 18. Yul Brynner. Yul Brynner was known for his clean-shaven head and commanding presence, but he didn't always embrace the bald look. Early in his career, Brynner wore human hair wigs to audition for roles that required traditional leading man hair. Only after years of fighting hair loss did he adopt the bald look and make it legendary. Before that transformation, Brynner's wigs were sleek, dark, and natural. Real hair allowed him to maintain a polished appearance while still fitting studio standards. As a stage actor and rising star, he needed to match the aesthetic expectations of the 1940s. Eventually, Brynner's decision to go bald became part of his brand. But those early wigs helped get him there. They were a stepping stone between conformity and bold reinvention. Sometimes, a borrowed look is the beginning of something entirely original. These stars defined old Hollywood. But behind the lights and lenses, many wore wigs spun from someone else's hair. Real beauty wasn't always natural. It was crafted, styled, and fiercely protected. Their borrowed strands carried secrets, strength, and resilience, woven not just into their scalps, but into the very fabric of legend.